Hi everyone, this is Sean. I'm back to do another video again. One of the videos that was requested was working with colors and developing color palettes. I'm not going to go really deep into color theory. I think there's some easier ways and simpler ways to look at color than to get deep into theory. So I'll just get right into it. So here are two color wheels. And essentially you've probably heard these terms primary and secondary colors. Well, essentially, primary colors, yellow, blue, and red are considered the most primary colors. And when you look at this other side of the screen, over here where my hand cursor is, the primary and secondary, essentially what this wheel is demonstrating is that if I take the color yellow and I combine it with the color blue, I get the color green, and vice versa. Yellow with red creates orange, red with blue creates purple. Kind of an important thing to know. Here, I just wanted to kind of demonstrate a little bit about complementary and tertiary colors. Essentially on this side, the left side, complementary colors. Every color has a complement. So red's complement is green, blue's complement is orange, purple's complement is yellow. And if you look on this color wheel, never minding all the different variations of colors within each slice of color, but if you look at the wheel, the opposite sides of a color wheel will show you what the complements are. So on this side is red, directly across from red is green, directly across from violet is yellow. Well, violet's another word for purple. And orange is directly across from blue. And that's just something that you should know about colors because that'll come into play a little bit later. So another color space I wanted to demonstrate or explain really quickly is RGB and CMYK, which you may have encountered if you fooled around with Photoshop and color palettes, or if you're studying graphic design, you'll know what these are. But for those of you who only have experience looking at Photoshop, RGB is obviously red, green, blue, and CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. But RGB is used primarily in photography. That's the colors that photographers understand, where graphic designers using print generally understand CMYK. One of the key differences here, how these colors work together in a design space, is that red, green, and blue combine to create white. So in other words, if I pull up my color palette here, you can see that the maximum values, like if I try to enter 258, you'll see that there's no such number. RGB values go to 255. If I have 255 on all levels, so that combines to make white. If I make all the values in RGB 0, it turns black. Now, conversely, here's my CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, black. You can see my palette over here is shifted. If all the values in CMYK are at 100, you get black. If all the values are 0, you get white. So essentially, ink combines on a page to make black. The more ink, the blacker it gets. The RGB side deals more with light. So the more light you have, the brighter, the closer to white it is. And that's just one of the differences between RGB and CMYK. If you're just dealing in Photoshop and doing things on screen, you're never really going to need to know that difference. But just so you have a little understanding about why RGB and CMYK are different. So the next thing I want to talk about is different color values. So color values mean percentages of color. And you can see here that on the left side of the screen, I've got this solid blue bar. But over on the right side, or more in the center here, I have these squares which go from a solid blue up to a very, very light blue. And so it's just important to know that colors have value as well as a color breakdown. This is a screen grab from a website called colorschemedesigner.com. It's kind of a cool website that I found, which saved me time having to create these graphics myself, so you'll excuse the plagiarism rather. But here's the URL. You can go check it out. I want to show you a couple different ways you can think of color palettes. A monochromatic color palette is a color palette that uses the same color with different tints. So if you had a one-color graphic design job, you would have one color and you would simply determine what value of those colors you could use, anywhere from 10% up to 100%. And this is called a monochromatic color palette, using one color with different values. This is an example of what's called a complementary color palette. So you can see that the primary color is still the purple. That's the main color we're working with as a concept here. And it's given me yellow, which, as we talked about earlier, is the complement to purple. And so that is a complementary color palette. And you can see the different tonal values here are also possible. A triad color palette, now there may be different words for that. I know there's plenty of different terms for what kind of color palette you can use. But the theory behind this kind of a color palette is that you take one color, you find its complement, which in this case, purple and yellow. You take yellow and you split the difference between yellow. You move outwards into more of an orange, more of a green. And the theory is that because these two other colors have a relationship to the complement of purple, that they still work together. And finally, there's what's called the analogic color palette. And an analogic color palette essentially says you're not going to move on the color wheel except a few steps left and right or beside the primary colors. So if I just go back through these, again, you can see that there's relationships between the color. And that's important when choosing a color palette. It's just knowing what kind of relationship you want to have. So I wanted to show you quickly from another website, colorlovers.com, but notice the Canadian spelling of color. In this case, you'll want to know that for the URL. But this is basically a site where people can contribute their color palettes and colors that they've created. And I wanted to show you a few just to kind of give you some idea. I'm going to get to how I think you can approach developing your own color palette. This color palette over here, Odd But Trendy, I actually quite like. I think it has sort of a nice combination of, it's got two darks on the right side. These darks can handle, heavy things like a lot of typography, where you have some nice highlight and accent colors, which could be key lines around boxes or colors of different graphic elements on your page, where the darker colors might contain more of the important information on typography. Blue Kitten is sort of a nice odd range. I thought it was a bit quirky for that reason, and I liked it. Game Bookers they've used complements as a basis, orange on the left side, blue on the right side, and some cool tones in between. It's all very cool, whereas Pink Elephant's all very warm. Here's a few more. I quite like this Trajan one. I could imagine some really elegant graphic design with this because the colors are very muted, as with the purple Prose. I like that one too. I find the typography one a little bit dark heavy, but we would need to see the application of this palette to know why the designer chose it. And this one was just sort of nice. The Ray Ayanami, I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm not going to try and get that right. But essentially, you can see that there's some pastel colors all the way through, with a couple of nice dark end colors, but they're not terribly dark. And they have relationships to the other colors, blue and blue. Pink doesn't have a relationship with green, but pink is a nice complement to this nice blue, and a gray neutral. So, these are nice color palettes. Okay, so this next part I wanted to show you is some quick examples I did of some different color palettes. What I did was I picked a theme. So in this case, I just found the image of a cat, and I called it the kitty color theme. And what I want to get at here is that you can pick a concept to begin your color choices from. If the concept is, I want all warm colors, you can do that. The concept is all cool colors, or the concept is all primary colors, or all complementary colors. You can give yourself that parameter in the beginning. Now, sometimes you'll already know what your color palette is because you've been given a logo or something to work with. If you haven't and it's all wide open, here's one way you can do it. I took this picture of the kitty and I sort of did some samples within the eyes, around the nose area, and in sort of the neutral areas of the cat's fur. And I came up with this little bit of a warm, muted color palette based on the photo of the kitty. So if I remove the photo, I'm just sort of left with this color palette, which is inspired by this image, but is not necessarily related to it in any other way. Another one is the sunrise here. I've obviously found something that was very warm and intense, and I wanted to grab some of those colors. And I mean, I could have gone with bright blazing yellow and really hot orange here, but I didn't, because I also have these sort of darker and neutral gray, which is actually not really neutral, it's more cool, against these warm undertone colors, and then I have, you know, the orange and yellow. And again, if I delete the photo, I'm left with this color palette. But the color palette is not related to this image, but it derives inspiration from this image, much like this one does. Again, sort of a cool landscape, a cold landscape sort of a thing. And I picked up some of the colors, but I stayed away from the warm colors, except the gray is a little bit warm to kind of complement these cooler colors, because there's also some warm tones you can see in this photo. But I wanted this primarily to be a very cold feeling color palette. So again, if I delete that, I have this nice cold palette with this warm accent, which is interesting. I'm not telling you that, you know, I wouldn't want to be so pretentious as to tell you that this is the best way to create a color palette, because color is so subjective. There's so much that goes into making those choices. But these are some things that you could try. And if you want to look at colorlovers.com for some inspiration, there's some really quirky and cool palettes there. Go to Color Scheme Designer and play around with that color wheel. There's some different options you can click, and it may point you in a direction. It'll just give you something to work with, you know, and you might enjoy that. It might be helpful to you. So that's you know, a little bit of information on color palettes and color theory. I hope that was somewhat helpful. And feel free to leave some comments if you have some suggestions or errors that I've made that you want to make a comment on. Please feel free to do so. And so anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.